Well, thank you very much, and good morning, evening, and afternoon to everybody for joining us today from across the globe on what is a very exciting and topical discussion today. My name is Abbas Simar. I am the president of the Canadian Association for International Development Professionals. Since 1993, as an organization, we have worked to bridge the divide between the development sector and the professionals working within that space, and alongside coordinating with our partners in the Global South to advance cooperation towards the development objectives stated by the Government of Canada alongside our own members itself. With that, today we're very excited to introduce a number of panelists that my colleague will do so in a moment. I'd like to welcome everybody today, and a couple of housekeeping rules. The first of which, kindly to ask to turn off your videos and your microphones for the duration of the presentation today. And where you do have questions, we are able to admit questions, and we're asking that to be on a one question, one individual basis within the chat function at the bottom of your screen. My colleagues will be fielding that chat window and arranging for those questions to be answered in due course. Aside from that, and as a final message, we are at yet again another inflection point as it relates to Afghanistan, and nearing the one-year anniversary of the return to Taliban rule. This presents a number of deeply concerning and troubling prospects for Afghanistan, its citizens, and the broader international development community. And today we'll have an opportunity to further unpack that. With that, I will close off my remarks and introduce my esteemed colleague, Marcus Wong, the president of the Vancouver chapter of the Canadian International Council. We're very pleased again to be hosting a second event alongside our fellow association. And with that, Marcus, please take it over.
Thank you so much, Abbas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly a pleasure to be able to welcome these speakers and panelists today, and I very much look forward to the session that we'll be having and the questions and answers that we'll be engaging in. Certainly as the nation of Canada looks towards its role in the world with respect to foreign policy as a classic middle power, it'll be very interesting as we sort of figure out what it means with the changing role of superpowers really in the world as it shifts towards away from the United States towards Asia. What will be the implications for Canada when it comes to countries like Afghanistan? What will it mean for our international development role and responsibilities? And how can we as a country best impact in a positive sense all of our allies and friends around the world as we strive for common goals? So thank you so much once again for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing the discussion.
And at this point, if I can invite our colleague Nipa Banerjee to, as our moderator for today's discussion, to bring forward our panelists and to initiate the discussion alongside our facilitator. Dr. Banerjee?
Welcome all to this session featuring high-profile speakers with first-hand and in-depth knowledge of Afghanistan and its situation. This session promises to offer realistic interpretations of the events in the country and their implications to help comprehend the current priority issues and consider realistic policy and programming options for aid to Afghanistan. Taliban swept to power in Afghanistan a year ago and declared the country an Islamic emirate. Since then, the Taliban has been trying to reassure the world that they have changed. Have they? In the days following the Taliban's recapture of power in Kabul, the Taliban leaders reaffirmed their commitments to ways they practiced in the past in the 1990s. Taliban promised not to inhibit the press as long as it did not go against national values. They expressed interest in forming an inclusive government with representations from all sections of the Afghan society. They pledged to respect women's rights as permitted by Islamic law and promised a moderate position on social issues, including allowing women to work and access education. A general amnesty was announced to those who worked with the former Afghan government and the international community, and all men and women were asked to return to their previous jobs. the Taliban promised not to harbor terrorist individuals and organizations within the Afghan territory. However, will things truly be different? Would the Taliban walk the talks? What does the Taliban return mean for Afghanistan? What are the prospects of Afghans and the international community engaging with the Taliban to promote reforms? Our experts in today's panel will offer in-depth analyses and provide advisories on future policy and programming options for the international community to pursue. I present Ms. Fauzia Kufi, Ambassador Javed Luden, and Mr. Ihsan Zia. I am proud to present each of the speakers I know personally. Their lists of achievements are very long to iterate within the given time. I highlight only a few. Ms. Fauzia Kufi, a well-known advocate of women's rights, has wide-ranging professional experience spanning from community services to membership in the Afghan parliament and in the previous Afghan government's peace negotiating team. She served as a deputy speaker in the parliament and chaired the parliamentary committees on human rights and women's rights. Ambassador Javed Luden, former diplomat and entrepreneur, has a similar diverse career. He served in high-level Afghan Republic government positions, including as a presidential spokesperson and chief of staff of President Karzai. He served as a deputy foreign minister. He was Afghanistan's ambassador to Canada and to the Nordic countries. Ambassador Luden entered the private sector in 2013, but recently returned to his primary interests in politics and government and development, and founded Heart of Asia Society, an Afghan research and policy analysis think tank. The ex-Minister of Rural Development of the Afghan Republic, Ihsan Zia's experience covers peace building, governance, rural development, and post-conflict reconstruction, all priority issues for Afghanistan as a fragile state immersed in conflict. Minister Zia emerged as a pioneer of peace building and conflict resolution by applying a do no harm analytical framework in Afghanistan. He authored several papers on peace building and provided strategic guidance and oversight to government institutions. As former country director of USIP, United States Institute of Peace in Afghanistan, Mr. Zia was engaged in the Afghan peace negotiations. He was the co-founder and chairperson of the Cooperation for Peace and Unity, CAPAU, focusing on capacity development for peace. I now turn to Mr. Sanjar Sohail, our Afghan-Canadian facilitator with more than 20 years of experience in the Afghanistan media sector. He headed up a reputable Afghanistan newspaper, Hashte Suv Daily, with a large social media following, and served in senior positions in several other well-reputed journals, newspapers, and popular radio and television shows. He produced and presented a number of radio and TV debates on human rights and current affairs. He was the co-founder of the Free and Fair Election Foundation of Afghanistan. His primary interest lies in democracy promotion and protection of freedom of speech. I welcome you, Sanjar, and our honorable speakers. You can take the session now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Banerjee, for the introduction. And thank you for organizing this timely event about Afghanistan. We are only a few days away from the first anniversary of the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. And with the Taliban, as you're all aware, last year on the August 15, with the escape of former president of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani, from Kabul, the Taliban took over the control of the entire country. Since then, a lot has changed in Afghanistan in terms of social, economy, and political issues of the country. The entire economy system of Afghanistan has collapsed. The Taliban abandoned the constitution of Afghanistan, and they have introduced harsh policies toward many sections of life in Afghanistan. They have also abandoned secondary education for girls, and they have also forced the women of Afghanistan to disappear or to disengage from the public life. With the recent incident in Kabul and the killing of Ayman al-Zawahiri, there are also the concerns about the harboring of terrorist organizations and international terrorist groups in Afghanistan. It's been 1 year since the Taliban takeover, and despite many promises by the Taliban to reform and to provide changes, we haven't seen any positive steps in the real life of Afghans. People are saying that the Taliban are acting differently when they are engaging and talking with the international community, and they're acting differently on the ground. So with this, I'm starting this discussion with my former colleagues and friends and Afghanistan experts. The first question is where is Afghanistan actually heading with the Taliban in power? I can start with Ambassador Ludi.
Sorry, can you repeat that question, Sohail said?
What do you think, Ludi said, Afghanistan, where is Afghanistan heading actually? Toward which direction is Afghanistan heading? What do you see?
Well, thank you so much. Well, basically, I think we are 1 year away, as you mentioned, from the Taliban takeover. We've seen a certain degree of consolidation by them of power. But that's primarily because they have not faced a political challenge. I think Ashraf Ghani's collapse was so comprehensive as a result of, I think, his escape. It was so comprehensive that it left no sort of legacy behind, no group that could claim a potential opposition to the political opposition alternative to the Taliban. So that has made it rather easy for the Taliban to consolidate politically. They have had to struggle with obviously governance, because obviously governance is just not about control. Governance is about being able to deliver services, to being accountable, and to being legitimate. And I think on those accounts there've been challenges. Nonetheless, they have obviously survived. Some of us did not predict that they would survive so easily their first year. Now, where they are, I think you referred to a very pivotal moment in your opening remarks, and that was the al-Zawahiri incident just a few days ago. And I would also add, not just that, but I think some of the recent events that have happened, including the killing just a couple of days later in Paktika of TTP leaders. I would also refer to certain incidents even before that, when Pakistan Air Force bombed certain locations in Afghanistan, and I would also refer to the fact that I think China's foreign minister in a recent meeting in Tashkent, I think expressed some frustration about the fact that there was concern on ETIM, the Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement's presence in Afghanistan. So some of those, the reason I'm mentioning that these are key events to note right now is because over the last 1 year, the discourse about Taliban rule in outside Afghanistan has been primarily focused on the issue of inclusivity, ethnic inclusivity mainly, the issue of the Taliban treatment of women, of course, issues of human rights in general, education, and obviously the humanitarian crisis. However, I predict, to just basically answer your question, I predict that moving forward, that discourse is probably going to shift more towards the question of security, because I think the Afghan people, Afghans by and large, but also regional countries and the international and globally, I think powers outside the region, the United States, Europe, in particular, they will be more focused on the Taliban's ability to deliver on that one commitment, and that was that they would not allow Taliban to be a threat to any other country. Now that's going to become more central. Sadly, that's in a way that obviously betrays what I think a lot of us already knew, and that was that the Taliban will never be able to control these forces. It's just that I think anybody who expected that they would be able to get a handle on the activities and the presence of these elements in Afghanistan was probably not serious or simplistic. We knew it, but nonetheless, in the last 1 year, people remained hopeful that the Taliban will be able to provide the kind of assurances that they were looking for in terms of their security. And now that seems to be gradually unraveling, then we will see a number of, to get back to your question, we will see a number of negative scenarios unfolding, but potentially for us Afghans, there could be some positives that may come out of that. Now, the negative side, I think on the negative side, sadly, we have already seen the United States taking an action, a unilateral action to bomb Afghanistan. We have seen Pakistan already doing that a few months ago. We just saw Pakistan, as I mentioned, TTP leaders killed in Paktika. God knows who did that. We might see, in fact, other countries taking, if they feel that their security is threatened from the Afghan soil, whether it's Iran, whether it's Uzbekistan, or even China, because I think that, as I mentioned, all of these countries are concerned about their elements in that they fear being present in Afghanistan. They might take it into their own action and launch these actions. And also, I think the engagement that we have seen in the last 1 year may take a different form. They might, so far they've been hoping that the Taliban will deliver on these things, and now they might do it themselves and try to ask the Taliban to then basically agree with it or turn the blind eye or not do anything with it. So sadly, Afghanistan will become another Syria. Really, that's the one scenario that could unfold. Now, what would the Taliban do? I think the Taliban clearly they will be unable to deliver on their counterterrorism commitments. As I mentioned earlier, it is not that they don't want. Some of them may actually truly want to really get rid of these elements and be able to work with regional countries, with global powers on the question of counterterrorism. Sadly, that's not a scenario that's feasible, because the Taliban is actually bound. It is joined in the hip with these groups, particularly TTP, with which they share, ethnic, religious, historic, political lineage, not just ideological views, but all these connections. And with other groups as well, a lot of them, like Al-Qaeda, for example, have pledged allegiance to them. So it will be quite hard to distance. So they will probably then, when they are unable, they might turn the blind eye to these countries doing their own counterterrorism measures. And they might focus more on whatever they think is their strong suit, like the economic agenda, trying to say, okay, well, we're doing a good job on the economy. Let's just, transit, we're facilitating transit, we could do trade. We are opening up Afghanistan for investment from, China, from Turkey, Pakistan. So they might focus more on that, and that might or might not happen. I'm a bit skeptical because regional countries may be interested in on the economic side of things, but when it, one thing that we've seen is that where the strategic concerns remain, where countries still are unsure about the real intentions of the Taliban, I think economic activity is not going to really grow beyond the limited things that we have seen so far by way of trade and transit. Now, on the very not to lengthen this discussion a lot, what could be the positive that could come out? I'm assuming that if in the last 1 year, the Taliban have totally shunned engagement with Afghans. They have not spoken to any Afghan group in a systematic manner, in a real organized manner, to lead to a more sort of inclusive political dispensation. They have primarily focused on dealing with the regional powers, but also with the international community at large. If they get shunned by the region and the international community, they might then focus domestically. So it's possible that some among them will then try to reach out to the wider Afghan political community and broaden the spectrum, and that could then mean that the inclusivity agenda could get strengthened, because they are now disappointed from outside, and then they could focus inside. But even on that one, I'm a little skeptical, sadly. I think, Taliban, the problem with totalitarian ideologies, whether it's religious or political, is that they find it very hard to broaden politically without pressure. But that might happen, and that's an opportunity that probably we Afghans could seek. But perhaps we could discuss this more. I'd not take more time of yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Lodin. Ms. Fawzia Kufi, you were part of the negotiation team. You were engaged with the Taliban for more than a year and talking to them directly in Qatar and Moscow and elsewhere. What do you think? Do you think the Taliban will be ready to talk to Afghans to form an inclusive government and to direct Afghanistan toward a more stable and secure country? And do they have the ability to actually provide such a platform for Afghans to exercise their rights and democratic rights?
Well, I think we are running out of levers to leverage over Taliban for opening up and for inclusivity. Initially, after the collapse, there were some hopes about Taliban's, pursuing a political engagement, but I think there are some barriers now which makes a political dialogue resulting to a political setup which is inclusive and representative and has domestic legitimacy smaller. All the windows are closing down, and primarily for a few reasons. First of all, I think the fragmentation among the Taliban is getting bigger. And as they divide over issues among their leaders and different groups, they will try to prioritize, their own politics over bringing, opening up for, Afghan representatives to join. So this is one factor. The second is, I think, the fact that the regional and extremist groups that have really been inspired by Taliban, they are in Afghanistan soils. They have expanded their activities. I know that there are, certain groups from Central Asian countries, including from Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and other Central Asian countries that are now becoming more stronger, engaging themselves in training of Taliban in north and northeast part of the country. So I think over time they will see that they have ability to mobilize themselves militarily, and gaining the support of all these military extremist groups. They don't see the need for a political engagement. And third, I think Taliban have gone that period of survival where they were in last October, December, where they were struggling. They were struggling on how to handle a transformed nation. They were struggling on the economy aspect of the situation. They were struggling on to get look nice in the international stage and get international recognition. They were hoping for that. I think that period is gone because first of all, when it comes to being able to adapt to the transformed nation, they have not. In fact, they have become more oppressive over few months, the later few months. If you compare, for instance, some of the measures that they have taken when they first took over as opposed to now, they have become more oppressive. For instance, their first decree minimizing women access to education was last 19th of September. Since then, especially during March, April, they have issued a number of verdicts and decrees to eliminate women's liberty. So initially, they were not sure how to handle such a nation. I think they have been successful in oppressing women's groups, in oppressing, censoring the media, also in the fight. They have also been able to oppress some of their military opposition. They have not been able to completely eradicate them. There are still military resistance, but for instance, the case of Balkhab is just
we cannot hear.
Oh, why I was muted. I think after al-Zawahiri attack, they feel more insecure, and that keeps the space for a political dialogue very, very limited. Meanwhile, I think the reason for them to become oppressive and to express their extreme version is because they want to keep their fighters. I was in Kabul, as you know, when Taliban took over, and I was talking with some of their foot soldiers as they entered Kabul. They had completely different image of Kabul. They were taught that, it's an un-Islamic city. Women are wearing the same outfit as women in the West are, men the same. It's completely an Islamic city. They were taught and giving that motif to fight. but when they took and they took control of Kabul, they came to Kabul, it was a different city. And most of them actually were looking for other alternatives than just fighting. They were demotivated. Now, I think they are putting all these measures in place, I think, just to keep their soldiers motivated and show that they are, especially on women's rights, they are the only force that could protect Islam. Why they want to keep their foot soldiers? Primarily to oppress their military opposition, but also to prepare themselves, because they have now lost hope on international stage. They have lost hope on political settlement. They know that it's not easy for them to get become a government, also in terms of proficiency and in terms of skills. They also know that they have regional supporters. I know that they have been leaning towards China. Russia has been the first country to accredit the Taliban's diplomat, but Chinese, we know that they have had a lot of contracts that were single sourced. So they know alternatives that they have are not the alternatives in terms of diplomacy and in terms of dialogue. The alternative they have in the region, they know is eventually going to put them in a very hard position in terms of a political dialogue. So I think the space for that is minimizing, especially for them to be engaged with society, because not only economy, but also the civic liberties, women's rights, the fact that politicians who are inside the country cannot even leave Afghanistan. You were listening to former President Karzai's interview yesterday, which he said he cannot leave Afghanistan. So I think, as I said before, I really wanted the world to help people of Afghanistan use all the leverage that jointly had over Taliban for a meaningful political dialogue. I see that window of hope is really closing down, or at least minimizing itself.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fawzia Kufi. Mr. Ihsan Zia, you were the Minister of Rural Development in Afghanistan, and you probably seen the changes in terms of income, employment in Afghanistan. According to some reports, 1 million people have lost their job and millions others lost their income. There is no access to basic services such as health, education, and other services, and the Taliban are not able to provide those services because the international aid has been stopped, and there is no development project going on. What's your take on what do you see the situation, and what do you think Afghanistan is doing what in with the Taliban in power?
Thank you so much. Good morning and good evening to everyone. Only yesterday, UNDP announced that the per capita income of the people of Afghanistan has decreased to $300 from $500 per year. And as you mentioned, almost 1 million people lost their jobs as a result of takeover of Taliban. And according to UN Women, restriction on women's employment have led to 1 billion economic loss, or about 5% of the GDP. 10 million people live, or tens of millions of people live in the balance as Afghanistan teeters in the brink of famine, with more starving people than anywhere in the world. The war in Ukraine has also added to the miseries of the people of Afghanistan by skyrocketing the prices of food, fuel, and fertilizers. United Nations estimates that 95% of Afghans do not have enough food, and half of the population of 30 million suffering from acute hunger. We have seen reports in such extreme situations, people desperate for money have sold their daughters to marriage, or even they have sold their own organs. So economically, Afghanistan is getting worse off because the the economy was, even during the previous government, was dependent very much heavily on aid donations, and with the cutting of aid, with the stoppage of aid to the government of Taliban, now the people are getting really suffering, and suffering is increasing every day, and more people are becoming dependent on aid. So Taliban prepared and presented a budget, and a budget for this fiscal year with 500 million shortfall. And we don't know how the Taliban will be able to make up this shortfall. While there are the health sector collapsed and Afghanistan lost, it is major gain of reduction in the mortality rates. And now the mortality rates are again in the rise. And according to a report of United Nations, it is doubled. Mortality rates in Afghanistan is doubled. Now ICRC has taken over the responsibility for running of 36 public hospitals. If ICRC did not come to help, the people would have experienced total collapse of the health services. So, and Taliban have shown no concern and commitment towards the public service delivery and public well-being. You know, 4 or 5 months ago, Taliban Prime Minister Mullah Hassan said that that Emirates have not promised food to the people. And they also failed in their promise of security. Security is worsening. There is a lot of crimes on the streets of Kabul and other cities. Taliban have not been able to control it, and in some instances, and their soldiers are part of it, and also the ISK attacks in Afghanistan is becoming more frequent, more brutal. Only 4 days ago, in an explosion that ISK took responsibility for, 50 people got killed in Kabul alone. So
120, according to UN.
You see, 120 in one attack. So there is a dire situation in all fronts, and they banned women from public, but the biggest crowds of women can be found around the bakeries, waiting for a loaf of bread to be distributed to them. So there is this dire situation, the rapid reduction in the per capita income as a result of Taliban takeover, and a dependency of the country. So I should stop here.
Thank you, Minister Zia. There are also reports coming out of Afghanistan about the aid distribution, the humanitarian aid distribution. The Taliban are distributing the aid among their own followers. If we are insisting on the humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, and the Taliban is providing those assistance and those aids to their foot soldiers, what will be the benefit of this humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan then, Minister Zia?
There is no way that humanitarian aid can be properly controlled and organized to reach to the starving population. Wherever in any country you work, you have to work with the system. You have to work with those in control, being the government, being the oppositions. So Taliban are benefiting from the aid distribution, and they are prioritizing their foot soldiers, but it at least reaches some people. The World Food Program, the distribution that is taking place is at least reaching to some non-Taliban as well. I'm not suggesting in any way that the aid will not benefit the people of Afghanistan as a whole. It will benefit, but it will benefit Taliban more than those in need.
Ambassador Ludin, what are the mechanisms for the aid distributions in Afghanistan? Is there a way to form a system or a format to oversight to see and observe the aid distribution among Afghan people? Is there a way to stop Taliban from abusing the humanitarian aid and allowing Afghans in need to receive those humanitarian needs?
Well, thank you. I think clearly Minister Zia would be more qualified to answer that question. And I think he, in a way, he has probably already done so. What I would say is that I think this is something, a concern that already exists in the international community. It's starting from the very first donor conference that took place in Geneva, right till now. And in every discussion that takes place is how a world that does not recognize the government of Taliban as legitimate, but at the same time remains concerned about the humanitarian crisis, how can it actually engage with Afghanistan as a country, and how can aid be channeled in a way that does not benefit the Taliban, but reaches the majority of the deserving people. Now, as Minister Zia said, it's impossible. I mean, in reality, it's impossible to 100% ensure that in no way the Taliban can benefit, or any government, or for that matter, even other forces outside government. Even the Taliban, when they were not government, when they were in opposition, they benefited from all development projects. In fact, there was a 10% Taliban tax on all development projects under the previous government. So there is no way in which people who are controlling an area would not benefit somehow. But the question is somewhere else, and that is, does that mean we should really lobby for aid to be completely stopped? That probably is a more complex question, because who are we to then make that judgment, how much of that aid gets delivered? But one thing we do know is for sure is that I think this is something that the world is taking seriously, the donor world. I am aware that a lot of countries are very, very serious about this, and that's why the UN has taken some serious measures to make sure that that's done. I know, for example, WFP, that's distributing food around the country, have taken measures to make sure that that can happen. For example, I know that for example, on the money that gets transferred for humanitarian purposes to Afghanistan goes to a private bank rather than to a government-owned bank. For example, the Afghanistan AIB bank. So those are the kind of measures that I'm aware of that donors are taking to stay clear of the government structure. But as I said, first of all, it's something that is complex. Secondly, if you think that there is no way there is a way in which you can 100% ensure that they will not benefit, that probably doesn't exist. Certainly, the fact that some Taliban benefit from it is probably not a good argument to just say, therefore, we should stop aid to Afghanistan. We should probably come up with ideas in which aid verification and supervision could be strengthened. Like, for example, I think there was a suggestion about maybe some non-Taliban or some independent Afghan verification mechanism can be put in place, in which aid could be supervised, and then the international community can be then informed about instances in which a disproportionate amount of aid gets siphoned off by the Taliban, if that's the case.
But there were also some criticism about the UN agencies, the highest cost of their administrative, spendings. There were reports before the collapse that the biggest part of the aids in the UN system goes to the administrative costs. For example, the security costs, the salaries of the experts that are coming from outside Afghanistan. So considering the situation and the level of the aid to Afghanistan, how do you see the impact of the aid coming through the UN agencies?
Well, you're making my heart bleed now, because I think for 20 years we really tried under the Republic. We tried to build a system. We tried to build a legitimate, nationally owned system of governance, and we lobbied for how international assistance should be channeled in a way that reduces waste and ensures that most of the money that comes in the name of Afghanistan, in the name of the Afghan people, that it actually arrives in Afghanistan, that it actually gets spent in Afghanistan and by the Afghans. And that's what the whole agenda of the building democratic, legitimate national institutions that could spend international aid legitimately and effectively was about. Now, sadly, under the previous government, issues like corruption, which completely, I think we have to admit as Afghans that we failed our own people, we failed the Afghan people on that account, and we failed the international community. We failed our people who helped us and gave us their tax money. But at the same time, now we are in a completely different situation where, it's irrelevant whether we Afghans, what we feel about it. The world does not recognize the Taliban, so it's not a legitimate system of government, and therefore they will not put money through this. Therefore, all the money if there is any money coming now, and obviously it's very little now compared to before, that's going to come through these very expensive channels, whether it's the UN or others. So I think it's not ideal, let's face it, because we have lost that opportunity. That's gone now. But it's just a little bit, I think, as Minister Zia said, the question really is about, are we in a position to just say, okay, the little bit that gets, that trickles down to the people who are actually in need, or we, should we just lobby and say that should be stopped because it gets abused, or because it gets misused by, all these expensive mechanisms? I don't know. It's a moral question.
What's your take on Ms. Fawzia Kufi on this?
Well, I have a different view. My view generally on this humanitarian aid is it's like, you beat a child to death, and after they start crying, then you give them a sweet so that they calm down. That's the situation of our nation. The world has betrayed with us. They have left the way they shouldn't have done that. And now when 24.1 million people are in dire need of food assistance, we just provide them with one, can of oil or bucket of flour, which as Ludeep Saib said, in a country that is rich in natural resources, the youngest nation in the world, according to UN humanitarian review report, Afghanistan is the youngest nation in the world. So huge potential for job opportunities and economic, the growth of economy, but we are engaging ourselves with something that is not sustainable, that nowhere in the world it has not been distributed in a way that it doesn't support the local power or the de facto authority. It did support the Hamas in Palestine. It did support Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria. It is supporting the Taliban government. And when I mentioned in my first intervention that the Taliban have gone past that period of survival, that's what I meant, is because they are using this humanitarian aid for their own foot soldiers, for their own people. But even if they don't get involved in corruption, suppose for 1 minute that the aid is completely directly going to the people, Taliban are in charge of security of the area. When there is aid distribution, they are working with local councils, shuras, to prepare the list of people in need. And all of that is actually the credit for everything that happens around the humanitarian aid distribution goes to Taliban. So I think this is not sustainable. We are basically engaging ourselves in something which the more we engage ourselves into this, the more this will continue. The more we talk about humanitarian crisis without tackling the political crisis aspect of the situation, the humanitarian crisis will continue. But on that question, I think there is need for a monitoring mechanism. I don't think we have actually a monitoring mechanism. Although, I mean, the World Bank report says that Taliban have been able to increase the revenue, domestic revenue collection. But the question would be, where are they spending that money? Do we really know where is the source of income? From my information on the ground, in my contact with the people, they have started training more people in the police and security. So most of the domestic revenue, the Taliban collect, and based on the World Bank report that they have been successful in doing so, which I have my doubts and questions, then the question would be, where are they spending it? They're spending it only on security, purely on security, to feed their foot soldiers. So the more money there, the more corruption. Now that there is no money, unfortunately, the reports indicate that there is no corruption or less corruption. I think that if there is cash flow, if there is money available to the same extent that it was for the previous government officials, there will be that level of corruption. They are using the humanitarian aid that is going to the people. They're giving it on, on lucrative basis to their own people, to their supporters, in many cases to their officials. And we know that WFP and others are doing a great job in terms of ensuring that it's not being influenced by Taliban, but we also know that it's not possible. So I think there is need for a monitoring mechanism. This is something we have been telling the UN country team in Afghanistan to work with civil society, with women groups, with others to develop a monitoring mechanism to be owned by the people, so that the people, there is a data collection on misdeeds in terms of the aid distribution. I think there has been some level of reluctance on working on a monitoring mechanism for humanitarian aid. But above all, I have a different view about humanitarian aid. I'm not in favor of humanitarian aid as much as we need it now, and it must continue. Obviously, there is no question that we should deprive people of Afghanistan, 24 million or so that are in dire economic situation, from receiving this humanitarian aid. You and I know, we are in contact with people. We know that people are not in good situation. I feel like Mr. Ludin, Ambassador Ludin, I feel guilty. I feel bad. I feel embarrassed for, having a country that or basically trying to, a legitimacy that we left, that now people are struggling and striving for a bag of flour. Of course, it's not a nice feeling. We know that people need that, but nonetheless, I think it's time for us to think beyond the box. I think the countries need to have a policy beyond humanitarian aid. I wonder what is the Canadian policy, foreign policy, when it comes to Afghanistan beyond humanitarian aid? Are they engaging with all sides? Are they engaging with political community of Afghanistan as much as they are engaging with Taliban? Are they engaging with women groups as much as they are engaging with Taliban? Are they giving enough space to the women groups? We all remember that in 2011-12, the Taliban had their first political office in Qatar. Is there any country that gave that political office to the women at this stage? Because women of Afghanistan are now the natural resistant group against Taliban. Are we giving enough space? In a matter of few months, we have become a diaspora. When we were in Afghanistan, inside the country, we were divided between women in the city and women in the villages, and that way they wanted to discredit us. Now they're trying to create a narrative that, well, women who had left Afghanistan, they are diaspora, because they want to, minimize the impact of our voice, because they know that our voice are making an impact. We are reaching out to the policymakers. We are mobilizing and amplifying Afghanistan. So there are all the efforts to minimize our efforts. Now, my question is, is there a country in the world, the countries that claim that they are protecting human rights and women's rights? We appreciate their claims. We know that they stand on these principles, but in reality, is there a country that actually opened an office for women to exercise their civic and political rights? In fact, when you are a politician as a woman from Afghanistan and you have your political views, different countries try to push you to the side, because they only want activists and not politicians, which is another sad reality. Because if you don't promote women in politics, if you don't promote women in decision making, how do you ensure women are empowered in the future politics of Afghanistan? So I think we have to really think beyond that one bag of flour and one can of oil.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fawzia Kufi. Before concluding this part of this conversation, I would like to ask Minister Zia and Ambassador Ludin and Ms. Fawzia Kufi about their expectations from the Canadian government and the Canadian people. Before the Taliban takeover, unfortunately, most of the countries, including Canada, was following the policies of the US on the ground. And I don't know, what do you see? How the Canadian policies are about Afghanistan, and what do you want from the Canadian government and the Canadian public to do for Afghanistan and about Afghanistan? Minister Zia, your mic is mute.
I would like to take this opportunity to first thank the people of Canada and the government of Canada for their sacrifices and for their generous support over the last 20 years, and also for their support to evacuation of more than 16,000 people to Canada. My expectation from Canadian government is to remain engaged in Afghanistan, because there is no war has to come to an end in Afghanistan. Violence have never brought peace and prosperity to Afghanistan. We have the experience of the last 40 years of armed conflict, and it will not bring another war will not bring prosperity and stability in Afghanistan. So what is left for us? What is left for us is engagement. Engagement not only in provision of humanitarian aid, but also engagement in working with other countries, other nations for pressuring or for encouraging Taliban to open up and engage in a political discourse with the people of Afghanistan, and to engagement for the Afghan government institutions to become functional, because now there is total dysfunctionality of the state institution because of the unqualified appointments that is taking place every day by Taliban, and only mullah and from one ethnic group is being appointed to the government portfolios. So continued development support and continued political engagement in Afghanistan is my honest and humble request from Canadian government.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ludin.
Well, thank you. I think the question of, before I specifically address the question of Canada, I think overall the subject that we are discussing is a complex one. It's, as I said, it's even if the Taliban were abusing aid, first of all, I think the assertion that they are there is a systematic abuse of the aid system are generally that there are assertions. I don't think we have seen a report yet to show that that's what they're doing. So I think it's right now we're just assuming that there is a little bit of that natural tendency that exists in all governments and all forces of control a place, that they would benefit from international aid, but we haven't yet seen evidence of a systematic effort or program by the Taliban to control aid, because that would not be possible, especially in today when everybody is so sensitized to this issue. As I was mentioning earlier, the UN system, the donor community, and generally Taliban is a heavily sanctioned group, so a lot of the donors would be very, very careful to follow and trace their money. So I think that's why we shouldn't make just simplistic assertions that the aid is going to the Taliban. That's incorrect. But even if they were, my point is that even if they were abusing it, that would still not justify us making a claim here that therefore aid should stop, because I think I would confirm two very important points that Fawzia Koofi made. One, that people still need aid, and that we cannot deprive them from it if such aid is available that could save lives. And I think the second point that I would endorse is that we should move beyond aid. And this is where I think I come to the specific question, Suhail Saib, that you asked about Canada. I mean, Canada is perhaps one of the pioneering countries on feminist foreign policy. It has a foreign policy that's fundamentally based on feminist values. So I would really like Canada to maybe, translate that into action a little bit. I think having a policy is one thing, but actually I would like Canada to maybe to take an initiative to basically implement in reality what a feminist foreign policy really looks like. Is it just about emphasizing these things in international fora and emphasizing how women should be treated and when it comes to Afghanistan, or is it something beyond that? I think it's especially I think Afghanistan is a testing case. Probably Afghan women are probably suffering what no women on the face of the earth are probably suffering. I mean, nowhere in the world are young girls deprived from going to school. Just show me one country where that is an official policy of their government. So in this case, I mean, which country would pride itself of having a feminist foreign policy and then not do anything about this particular challenge? What can they do? Canada may not be a superpower, but it's a middle power. It's also not. It's a G7 country. For God's sake, it's one of the 7 most powerful, richest countries in the world. It has an extremely strong mission in the United Nations. Very well respected. It's a chair of the the chair of the Friends of Afghanistan group right now in the UN headquarters. It has an extremely respected, widely expected. A lot of them are actually present on this call today. An extremely widely respected diplomatic corps globally. And what it can do is to actually take this cause and bring some pressure to on this point, on what it would really mean. Perhaps, as you know, perhaps this whole rhetoric about women's rights and should maybe now translated into some sort of an actionable initiative. I'm not able yet right now to suggest what could that be, but that's, I think, perhaps for the Canadian government to decide. But one thing I certainly would like is from Canada's foreign policy establishment to really take a special initiative when it comes to Afghanistan.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ludin. I think the issue of women's education and women's participation in public life is very critical and important. And as an Afghan, I believe that if the world will be able to put pressure on Taliban to change their policies toward women, then other things would also slowly would solve. What's your take on this, Ms. Fawzia Kufi, about the role of Canada on the situation?
I think, Sohail said before, I talk about the role of international community, especially countries like Canada, where they, as Ambassador Ludin said, they have a feminist foreign policy. I really want us, the Afghan people, the people of Afghanistan, to come up with their own narrative. You know, we expected so much from the international community, and we have tried to keep all the expectations in a way that the international community will make our dreams come true. That we were in limbo. We were so dependent to what international community can do to us that when, you know, last year in July, the last American soldier left from Bagram Air Base in the middle of the night, leaving Bagram Air Base, the biggest military base of Americans, to nobody. And we know that a lot of, basically it then went to thieves and people who stole everything, all the objects that were there. After that, like it happened in the middle of the night, the next day, a lot of Afghan soldiers from the border provinces of Afghanistan fled to Tajikistan. So that indicated how dependent we are. I'm really in favor of having our own narrative, trying to figure out initially, internally, what do we want? You know, how do we want this country to move forward? Are we really willing to work with each other? Are we really willing to commit and sacrifice a little bit of what we want, our political wishes, for the sake of the country? Because for me, now the being of Afghanistan sometimes is even at risk. With all these complexities in the region, different countries with different interests. That being said, I think because we are living in a global village, even now not anymore a village, it's like even a phone, a mobile phone. The expectation from Canada would be to continue to support civil society, to continue to support media inside Afghanistan, women-led organizations, local shuras, local councils, to be able to deliver on alternatives. We do remember from the first round of Taliban in power that civil society, if not civil society, non-governmental organizations were so strong that they were the ones delivering for the people. So we need to really probably bring that, implement the same strategy. But also, I think the Canadian role in terms of, again, delivering on Taliban, I think international community has gone from one extreme to another. You know, just before 29 February 2020, NATO allies and the US, including the Canadian friends, have been fighting with Taliban. Yeah, I know Canadians left a little bit earlier. I think they left in 2014 from Kandahar. But before that, they were fighting with Taliban. So from all that, being an enemy and in retaliation mode, they went all of a sudden to sign a deal with Taliban without even including the Afghan society, the political community of Afghanistan, the Afghan civilian government. So there has not been a middle ground of a political pressure. I think Canadians have a role in UN. I think they need to really ensure that Taliban do not travel anymore freely, while Afghan people, Afghan women and politicians and civil society and people of Afghanistan cannot travel. Why would the Taliban have the privilege to have all these chartered plane jets traveling from across the world? This is the first thing. The UN travel ban decision is coming up in September. My expectation from the Canadian mission in New York would be that they should actually support and lobby for Taliban to be sanctioned to travel from traveling. This is the first thing. It's a political pressure. It's not a military, it's not a weapon, it's not a B-52. It is a political pressure on Taliban. Second, I think using the regional countries link with Taliban, the countries in Middle East, in Gulf states, the countries in the region, they need to really be held accountable, because these countries have been hosting Taliban for very long and portraying an image, and we seem to believe that image, and now we're trapped into that image and a narrative that we have created for Taliban collectively with our international friends. So I think they can continuously engage with regional countries to hold Taliban accountable for their deeds, and meanwhile support the women of Afghanistan and the political community of Afghanistan, so that they mobilize themselves, they remobilize themselves. Stop calling us diaspora. At least the minimum they could do. I'm not diaspora. I'm here on a temporary basis, and I think that was a mistake for the world initially to plan this evacuation in a way, and the way it happened. If some of us were inside Afghanistan, probably, even if with the cost of our life, we could bring some change. We could, demonstrate some level of resistance inside Afghanistan with a stronger voices. But anyways, now where we are is, of course, a reality. Taliban are just one reality. The rest of the society of Afghanistan, the other realities of Afghanistan must be consulted, must be included, and must be part of the engagement of the world.
Thank you very much for your inputs. And before opening the floor for a question and answer period, I would like to hand over the microphone to Nipa Banerjee for her comments, and then the floor is open for questions. Dr. Banerjee?
Hello. Well, I'm really overwhelmed because of the richness of the discussions and the viewpoints that have been presented to us. It requires, I will not provide commentary right now. I could do that later, but I need to ponder and think about these issues and how Canada could respond to that. Well, I mean, how Canada responds, we can't determine that. Well, I once worked with the Development Agency, and I was in Development Agency of Canada, and I was in Afghanistan for 3 years as the head of the aid program. I must say I was quite disappointed myself at the way sometimes we handled Afghanistan. Well, I don't blame them for lack of realistic assessments at that time in those earlier years of the 2000s, because the international community, Canada inclusive, did not know Afghanistan. However, there is very little excuse now not to, after 20 years of involvement, not to look at the realities. And our panel members have given us the realities. Again, I'm overwhelmed with the richness of it, and I need to have time to assess, and we will do something on on that, perhaps along with CAIDP or myself. And I intend to send this recording, if they are not here, to the Global Affairs Canada, for them to have a look and listen to what is going on. Another reason that I don't want to comment is what exactly Fawzia has said, that it is Afghanistan and Afghans that will have to decide. There has been too much of dependence on foreigners and foreign powers. I guess for the sake of money, and but with that constraint, it's probably not there now. So I mean, I promise that I will come back and provide you with some kind of feedback. If I don't get anything from the government, and that is quite possible, I will give it myself, some kind of analysis that I see from it. And I hope you will excuse me excuse me for this lack of comment right now. But Sanjar, there are lots of questions and comments. Do you want to proceed with those? Some of the comments that I see here, they're all pertinent, very important. And so would you like to proceed with that?
Of course. Yeah, thank you. Well, there are some comments on the chat. I think everyone is able to see that I'm not going to repeat those, but the floor is open for questions. Anyone having questions can raise their hands, and I'll let them to ask their questions directly from our panelists.
Nobody wants to say anything. I mean, there are chats here, and I'm just wondering that if you would like to.
Well, yes, there are some ideas that Arthur says that include the Taliban ex-soldiers in training. They need to be able to do more than shoot rifles. There is also a question, can Canada do this alone? Of course not. Canada has a gender-focused foreign policy, as mentioned by Ms. Fawzia Koofi. We haven't seen lots of initiatives from the Canadian government lately. At least in the past 1 year, the government of Canada were busy with the evacuation, resettlement, and also with the situation in Ukraine. And there's also a comment from our participant, Yamal Mubtaker, that my message is to our Afghan abroad is, let's unite and explore ways to help our country and our people. So Abbas Samar wants to ask a question. Please, Abbas, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And again, this was a fantastic discussion, very much topical, and we certainly look forward to additional discussions going forward. I think my question is going to be a much more simpler one. And as a common person here in Canada wanting to get involved, there are a number of ways that you constantly hear about it. And I think from what I've heard so far, you certainly all have the best perspective on where somebody like me in my little corner in the Niagara region of Canada might be able to support. I'd love to hear from you. This might be an opportunity for us to figure out ways where we can lean in, even being so distant from Afghanistan. Thank you.
Well, I think I'm going to ask this question. Yes, Rajula, please go ahead.
I had the good fortune to work in Afghanistan, and in fact, Nipa, you may remember me. I worked for UNDP. I am really impressed by all the participants who contributed to this discussion, but I really liked Fawzia's approach about trying for Afghanis to figure out what it is they need. And two things come to mind. I mean, I suppose my ancestry includes Afghanistan, but I don't want to speak for the Afghani people, but I would like to say for the women, it seems to me like education and health would be two great needs that exist right now. And given now with COVID, we have a lot of experience in how to provide education remotely. This could be something Canada can do because we, of course, there are limitations in terms of technology and systems, but still that would allow women to stay at home, but still be educated. And then there are other countries that have, say, like Pakistan and India, that have models for improving the health of women and training women to provide basic health. So these are things that could be done, and I would just like to propose those to Fawzia.
Thank you so much, Jula. Any other questions or comments?
I was wondering if any of our speakers, they want to, who might have read the chats, if they want to comment on any of the issues that have been raised.
Yes, please. Ambassador Ludin, Ms. Fawzia Kufi, if you want to respond to the questions and comments.
Well, if Ambassador Ludin is,
Please, no, I would
unmute himself. I'm going to take the opportunity. Thank you so much for very concrete suggestion and willingness to listen to the people of Afghanistan. As I said before, now I think after many years, we have learned, and one of the lessons learned is to be able to create our own narrative. Rajula, on your specific questions about girls' education, of course, it gives all of us a big amount of pain to think after 20-something years. And throughout our history, we have been a civilized nation. In fact, women of Afghanistan have started the right to vote before the women in Switzerland did. So we did enjoy our civic liberties. It's not limited to the Taliban time or the civil war. That's the indicators that usually the world use. We have had a civilized nation. That is painful to see. Women of Afghanistan have started entering medical colleges the same time that women in Turkey started. But now where Turkey is and where Afghan women are, of course, it gives me pain to, again, lobby for online education, but that is the only opportunity and alternative for now. If there is anybody willing to teach Afghan girls online English, please DM me, and I will be very happy to connect you with the education institutions and schools in Afghanistan, in Kabul, but also in other provinces. This is a volunteer, absolute volunteer thing. I fully agree with you, Rajula. Health, training of women in health sector like nurses, midwives, but also doctors. That is something that Taliban do not oppose. So we should really use that opportunity because it's also a respected and dignified profession and something that people, not only women, but men in Afghanistan also need. So we need to really invest on that, training women to become nurses, midwives, but also medical doctors. Investing on that is going to really help. Talking about all of this, but sometimes we struggle to find a computer for a girl. You can imagine all the money that is being raised for Afghanistan, but now we have a struggle to find a computer for a girl to have an online class. But I would like to thank you all, and you're right, we need to really partner with UN Women and others and try to keep the voices of people of Afghanistan amplified. Thank you.
I have a question or a comment. I mean, it is very valid, the kind of training that is required for the women. It would definitely be of assistance. However, one issue that I experienced when I was in Afghanistan and also later through my travels is that yes, there was after 2001, there was improvement in women's position. However, I found that rural women and poor women had not gained from it. And, when I went to villages, and I did, despite restrictions from my embassy, I had managed to travel, which probably I shouldn't have, but I had traveled. And I went to villages, remote villages, comprising about 10 households maybe. And the women hardly knew, they did not know anything about the facilities they could avail. They had not received any, as well as, my issue is that elite women have gained, and they are likely to gain further in the future. Elite women and some of the educated women, they have gained, but the rural women haven't. And some of the rural women did not even know that there was a war going on in the country. They stayed amongst their, within the village, and they never went out of the village. So that's something we should not forget. That is my own experience I'm talking about. And also there was, work done by a journalist, Anand, who had looked at women's position, rural women and poor women's position. So, Fawzia, Javed, or Ihsan, anybody could answer that. Ihsan could, because he was involved with rural development.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. Before going to our panelists, there is also another question, I think. Les Bernier, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And hello, Nipa. I hope you're well. We know each other from working in the...
Right. In CEDA.
Your mic is
since that time, and followed you when you were there. Just a couple of thoughts about our discussions. Our discussions have been very elucidating, and I've learned a lot, and I think everybody has learned from each other. But I think we're trying to reach beyond our means. So my question is, how can we keep it simple and still make a difference? So one definite suggestion I have is how can we expand our own little network here and bring in other people so that we can become more of a voice in terms of maybe reaching out to the Canadian government. And so that's where I would start. I'm not sure we can find an immediate solution to what's going on in Afghanistan. And I believe there isn't an immediate solution. It's going to take a long time and a slow process. And maybe we just need to sort of think locally, but reach globally. So again, that's the first suggestion. The second suggestion in line with that is our ambassador to the UN. Is there some way that we can reach Mr. Bob Ray, who I'm sure would be interested in talking to us or finding a way to communicate with us, and maybe even somehow joining our group and sharing his ideas. So that's sort of a second suggestion. The third, sorry, just a minute. Sorry. So the third quick suggestion is based on what Madame Kufi said about, helping Afghan women online to learn English. Well, we have a local need that I think would be much easier to address, and that's just by helping a lot of Afghanistanis here in Canada, including Ottawa, who don't speak any English or are struggling with their English and would love to have some help learning English. So again, I'm focusing on a local need, but thinking globally.
Thank you so much. I have received a warning that we are over time right now. So I'm handing over the microphone to Ambassador Ludin and then Minister Zia to just wrap it up and give us their final comments and response. Thank you.
And I will just conclude thanking them, etc.
Absolutely.
After Javedan.
Ambassador Ludin, please go ahead.
But could I get a bit of some kind of comment on what I mentioned about rural women and poor women, especially, not necessarily concentrating our aid on educated elite women?
Absolutely. Ambassador Ludin, please go.
And that's such a good point, Nipa. I think Minister Zia is immensely more qualified to comment on that, so I'll leave that to him. But I'll just, before making a sort of a general comment, just to wrap up this discussion that we've had, at least on my part, just to say that Ambassador Bob Ray, Canada's permanent representative in the United Nations, an extremely well-respected diplomat that Canada has at the United Nations. I think it's great news. He's very engaged, by the way. We've been working with him as part of the Heart of Asia Society to you know, and he's heading, as I said, he's heading the Friends of Afghanistan group at the United Nations. So I'm sure he would probably welcome an opportunity to come and speak here. But it's just that you know, that potential can probably be used much more. The UN is, after all, and I think right now when it comes to Afghanistan, the UN has become much more relevant. It always was relevant, but it's right at the center right now of international engagement in Afghanistan. And I think it's probably a good idea to use the UN's political arm as much as possible, not just the humanitarian and aid delivery in the various agencies, but to also see the UN as what it can do in bringing the world more closer behind some sort of a consensus about how Afghanistan can be supported. And I think that the you know, New York in that sense is a very important place where Bob Ray is, Ambassador Bob Ray. So what I would say is that you know, what I said earlier about the fact that the Taliban have refused to speak to Afghans over the last 1 year. They have spoken to everyone except the Afghan people. And I think it's probably, I'm seeing now the trends going in a direction where that, you know, if that becomes a possibility, where then we need to do a number of things, and perhaps this is where Canada can help. One is that we need to have an interlocutor for the Taliban. Who is going to speak? Let's say tomorrow the Taliban come and say, okay, well, we are going to open up and we are going to engage and create a, you know, we're open to an inclusive, broad-based government system. Now, who's going to talk to them? So I think it's extremely important that that there's a non-Taliban vision, you know, articulated, the thing that Fawzia Kofi just mentioned earlier, and that we are all, in a way, adherents of. It's just that we are all over the place. A lot of people are calling us diaspora. Some call us, you know, essentially the former regime. So that there's something, an alternative political voice gets shaped up. So some sort of an intra-Afghan process of dialogue should be supported, and perhaps Canada as a country that has a good reputation for encouraging dialogue, can support an intra-Afghan dialogue process. Number two, it's also very important that when we really I think what I mentioned earlier was just a wish that the Taliban would realize, because there is also a doomsday scenario, and that is that the Taliban, despite the pressures that are on them, and specifically because the world has not recognized them, and the pressure based on what's going on will increase on them, so they will become even more isolated and even more repressive. That rather than opening up for dialogue, they would actually completely close down. That is also a possibility. Let's not forget. Let's also not forget that the Taliban is not, I mean, we've known Taliban. It's not that it's not that we have to wait and see. We haven't had the Taliban for 1 year. We have actually known Taliban for more than 20 years, for 25 years. They had a government to run for 5 years in the 1990s. So I think that, there is not much that we need to really discover about the Taliban. We really need to now think about how we can overcome this, because whether it's at the end of the day, one thing that we've proven over the last 20 years is that, the Afghan people, for all its faults, a system where Afghans can participate, can express their views freely, can choose their political destiny, which basically a democratic form of government, is really the only way forward to unite this country, to bring this country together, and also to provide some sort of a credible partner for the rest of the world. And how is that going to be possible now when we have the current establishment? Maybe that's where we can direct our energy, is to see by supporting some sort of a pluralistic approach. Again, number one step would be to support some intra-Afghan process that Canada can support. And the second thing would be for us, primarily really as Fawzia Koofi mentioned earlier, is for us to, as Afghans, to sort of grasp this opportunity, come together, create an alternative voice, and then engage the Taliban towards change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Ludin. That was very important. I think that creating a space or a mechanism for Afghan politicians, Afghan civil society, and other actors to be engaged, and creating a mechanism for intra-Afghan dialogue. Minister Zia.
Thank you so much. Let me first address the questions that Nipa put on how to support the woman, the rural woman. I think now people are equally suffering, being rural women or urban women. They both suffer, particularly urban women whose life were dependent on the salary income that on the jobs that they have lost. And 2 months ago, the UNDP country director stated that Afghan middle class has become extremely poor. The working class, the middle class in Afghanistan and Kabul and other cities have become independent. So there is a need to address and support both Afghan and rural women, and also urban women in Afghanistan. And there are mechanisms. In rural Afghanistan, over the last 20 years, we established community development councils through the flagship program of the government of Afghanistan, National Solidarity Program, which is a governance and community empowerment in genuine sense. And those community development councils consisting of males and females still exist. And aid and support to the Afghan women can be delivered through those mechanisms, which have not been effectively used by the aid mechanism so far. So this is one issue. And also how to provide aid in a sustainable manner is to focus aid on job creation activities, so that job employment is delivered, is created at the doorsteps of people, so that women do not face any cultural limitation and barriers to to take up those jobs. On the issue of inter-Afghan group and creating an alternative political structure, I agree with my colleagues, with Fawzia and Jawed. Unfortunately, the known political groups, the known political leaders have played a major role in creation of the catastrophe of collapse in Afghanistan. They were part of it. They are equally responsible as Taliban. And those people are extremely being discredited, and they should not be helped and reached out to revive again, because they have proved to be a catastrophe for the people of Afghanistan. And now there is a need for getting a new group of Afghans with the unity of purpose. We need to establish a group with the unity of purpose. We need to establish a vision for Afghanistan for the first time in the history among Afghans. How do you want the country to move? In which direction we want the country to go? So in this respect, Canada can play a major role, since a large number of at least 16,000 people are being recently evacuated from Afghanistan and are resettled in Canada in different cities. And there is a great potential to start in Canada, and then also include Afghans in Europe and United States and other places. So to create an interlocutor to Taliban and a new interlocutor for the international community for advice and consultations. So I should not take too much of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your rich comments and inputs. I'm handing over the microphone to Dr. Banerjee for her concluding remarks. I think we are already 18 minutes over time. So I thank you all for your participation to this discussion, and we're looking forward to future discussions like this on Afghanistan issues.
Hi, Sanjar. We have completed a highly utilitarian session with enriching discussions, which deserves equally analytic commentary as a conclusion. However, we have reached our time limit, and I can only conclude by thanking our speakers. Dear Fawzia, Jawed, and Ihsan, we thank you for spending your valuable time with us to guide us during an unsettling period in your lives. Our best wishes will be with you in your personal and professional ventures. We will reach you for further guidance, definitely, as all of the speakers have spoken about, and Les Brenier has given us some clues as to how that can be done, and we will follow up on it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Abbas, do you want to add something at the end? Or?
Sure, I'm happy to be very brief. So on behalf of the Canadian Association of International Development Professionals, thank you all for taking the time today to participate in such a timely discussion. In the same vein and somewhat repetitive, I'd like to thank our esteemed Professor Nipa Banerjee for bringing this important issue back to the forefront and for working with CAIDP on today's discussion with what I would say is an esteemed and stellar panel of change makers and thought leaders, for which I think all of us are grateful for your continued and enduring commitment. On that note, I would just simply encourage everybody to continue to lean in with your own generosity, whether it's financial resources, time, and whatnot, to support the many local and global actors committed to resolving the humanitarian crisis in play in Afghanistan. One final quick note, the full recording would be made available on our CAIDP YouTube page. Give it about 2 weeks or so, and it should be up there, alongside a series of new webinars and opportunities for thought leadership in the fall and beyond. Before closing, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we gather. In my own case, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live here and work with us today. And with that, thank you all for taking the time to join us. We wish you a safe and a happy week and look forward to re-engaging with you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.